Today on Locked On Canadiens, the NHL boy auction took place over the weekend. We break down who the Habs picked and who we as Canadiens fans should get excited about.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. We want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick. You might have seen my work in the past on Habs Eyes on the Prize or as a producer for Hockey Primetime. And I'm joined as always by my wonderful co-host Ian Boisvert, who you might have seen on Rabbit Habs, or you might have listened to his podcast, The Build, before we stole him to come on this show. Ian, how are you doing? The draft is now in the books. We're getting closer and closer to the full off season for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, I want to do what I think. I've been listening to a lot of content and podcasts about the draft, and I want to do what all of them have done in the first 90 seconds of their content to say we cannot do a draft like this ever again. We cannot do it. The decentralized nature of it is one thing. To then send the prospects into a room where they got on a Zoom call where I know at least for the Bruins and the Senators, they just didn't work. And you just have a player staring at their new bosses, just like, well, thanks for drafting me, and they can't hear a word you're saying. It just felt like I was back at work, back on Zoom calls and doing all of that. We cannot do this again. Night one took 4 hours. Day two took 5 hours. We cannot do it again. Please do not make us do this again.
Yeah, I think this was like Gary Bettman's way of giving, was it the GMs or the owners, whoever it was that was complaining about all the travel costs and all the logistics and all of that. Honestly, like it was his way of giving it to them. And then now he's going to be able to say, see, that didn't work. And I have to say, like, I'm not one to praise Gary Bettman, but he did his best with what he was given, with the situation he was given. He tried to be funny. He tried to be approachable. He tried to be like chill. And I honestly, I thought that if the whole thing wasn't so awkward, that would have been a normal, a good Gary Bettman performance.
He was one of the only redeeming things about night one of the draft, which if that's the case, look yourself in the mirror. We really screwed up. The only other part that was redeeming was the Ducks sending Roger McQueen out to Disneyland in the middle of the draft. I was like, they'll send him tomorrow. The draft wasn't even over, which isn't to say much because it took forever. And this guy is hanging out with Donald Duck and hanging out with his brother, Lightning McQueen, who, by the way, he is wearing the number 95 in the NHL as the number that is on the car, Lightning McQueen. So he was one of my favorite stories from draft day. So we'll end on a positive note, but yes, they need to fix that. That was a disaster.
Absolutely. And the Montreal Canadiens didn't even pick that night. And because they made a massive trade, which we did talk about in our bonus episode, but we do have a couple more thoughts about that that we're going to get into in our last segment. But first, let's go through the Montreal Canadiens draft picks in order and see how excited we are about them. I have to say, as a person who reads draft content, but is by no means a draft expert, the consensus was the Canadiens did good again, right? They did a good job this year.
Yeah, I think, and Bobroff said it in his post-draft press conference, as all of these directors of scouting have. He said there was a mandate from up top to swing for top six talent, and I think that started with their first pick number 34, second round. It took the Canadiens exactly one pick in the second round to decide we have to get back up early in this draft. We saw pick 33 go off the board, and they immediately moved up. They traded pick 41 and pick 49 for pick 34. I think there was also one in the hundreds in there as well, who I'm not getting into that. But yes, Alexander Zharkovsky goes 34th overall to Montreal, right winger, playing over in for UFA in the sub KHL league, the MHL. He was 42nd in the EP draft guide. He was ranked with the 5th best hands in the draft by their scouting poll. He's a winger with elite hands. He's got an interesting development path. The first 16 MHL games this year, he had 6 points. In the last 29 games, he had 46 points. So something clicked for him in the middle of this season. Bobrov has the chance to be, the Canadiens' sort of key cog when it comes to Russian players. We've seen them take swings on Russians in the past few drafts. They're a bit of a market inefficiency right now. Teams are kind of weary about selecting players from there, not only due to the geopolitical aspects of it, but the fact that you don't really have a ton of control over their development, as we saw with Ivan Demidov. So I think that this is another swing. I will say David St. Louis of Elite Prospects said he's a boomer bust. It's a good bet for Montreal for him to boom. He has the talent to get there. As far as early second round picks, pretty exciting, right?
Absolutely. And I do want to point out that one of the things about him is that this kid is going to be playing over on that side of the world for a few years, right?
Yep.
We're going to be lucky if we see him by 2027. This is a long-term project, but we saw that with Romanov too, right? We had to wait a long time, and obviously he got traded away, but it was really exciting when he did come over. This is not a situation like an Ivan Demidov situation, and it cannot be because he's not ready yet, right? So this is something that's really, really important to keep in mind. As Ian pointed out, it is a bit of a market inefficiency. And I like that the Canadiens are just taking swings right now, because if it works out, it's going to be incredible. If there's a bust, well, they made 9 picks in this draft, right?
Yeah, they took a lot of swings. And look, their first 2 picks, we'll talk about the second one in a moment here. Their first 2 picks they traded up for, which was, something that you could sort of expect from a team like Montreal who stockpiled picks so that they could move up when the moment was right to get a guy they really liked. They really liked these players because they decided in the moment to move up. Now, Montreal said about Zharkovsky that they had him as a first round talent, which you're the second pick in the second round. That's not saying much of anything, if we can be honest. But that tells, and they kind of thought that maybe they would have used 16 or 17 on him. We talked about how if they were making those 2 picks, maybe the first one is on a player that's a little safer. The second one is a big swing. That feels like the big swing, doesn't it? The fact that he got into the second round at all and the Canadiens were able to move up, that they see that as a pretty strong development. He's under, like you mentioned, he's under contract in Russia until May of 27. So not seeing him for a while unless they write him out of that contract. But even so, you want this guy to just be over there at home developing. He's 6'1", 163. He was the lightest player in the draft class. So he needs to bulk up. He needs to get bigger if he's going to have an NHL impact. But I think just swinging for upside here, I love this pick for Montreal. I really do. If he doesn't hit, okay, it's fine. It's an early second rounder. You can make moves inside of that top 6. But if he does hit, you've added a top 6 winger. That's impressive stuff.
Yeah. And we've done a lot of stuff in the past about percentages of what round player is, what percentage of making the NHL, et cetera, et cetera. Because right now the Canadiens, they're gonna 2 years from now, 3 years from now, they're gonna need to worry about a star departing and somebody coming back in, right? So this is in the plan. You want to make sure you have stockpiled prospects. All right, let's get to our next guy. The Montreal Canadiens traded up to 69 to get a large guy.
That was for Scott. Yes, they traded up from 79. This was a trade with the Bruins, by the way. They trade up from 79. They add 108 to get to pick 69. And they take Hayden Paupanekis, center from Swift Current of the WHL. Elite Prospects rank 43. So from that area, pretty good value to get him at 69. They list him as a comp as more skilled Adam Lowry, which, hey, if you're getting that kind of player, tight. That sounds really cool. 6'4" and a quarter, 196 pounds. This is a big boy. Really, the one thing I want to lean on here, and the one thing that fans should take away from hearing this player was drafted, he is going to be, if he hits in the NHL, a very strong defensive center, sort of like a guy that you could plug in as your third line center and just expect, really strong defensive checking line minutes, probably a decent penalty killer at that. He might have some room to grow offensively, but I wouldn't bank on it. I would just, if you're getting the floor of this player, which at, pick 69 in the third round, the floor is strong for him. I'm very excited about this player, almost in the complete inverse of the reasons why I'm excited for Zharkovsky. This is a defensive forward who's going to, solidify your bottom 6 and give you a position you don't have to worry about.
Absolutely. And so we've got to get through all the other draft picks, which we will do momentarily. The Canadians picked a detective from the 1950s for their next pick, and we'll talk about him in just one moment here on Locked On Canadian. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. Up next is defenseman Bryce Pickford.
Yeah, this is an interesting pick for the Canadians. Defenseman, a right shot out of Medicine Hat of the WHL. By the way, the WHL kind of dominated the early stages of this draft. I feel like as I was recording the picks in the first round, it was OHL, WHL. Like it was just those two leagues generating talent. But look, Bryce Pickford, like I said, right shot defenseman, 6 foot even, 190 pounds. Elite Prospects had him ranked at 95, so you could call it a reach. But once you get into sort of the late third round, you're at the point where none of these are really reaches. We're picking guys that we like. And the Canadians seem to like this player. He showed a lot of improvement over the course of the last 2 seasons. He's an overager. This was his draft plus 1 season. So Montreal has taken a couple swings on guys in their second draft year. I believe Florian Xhekaj is one of them. Like that's kind of the type of player that they like to go after here. He set the WHL playoff goal scoring record for defenseman. He had 20 goals in the playoffs. Activation game was great. Passes, relocates, and looks for a shot. He's constantly looking for that in the offensive zone. Right now, he's a bit one-dimensional, though. Like that's all you're getting from him. We talked about Sean Aitchison, who ended up being taken with one of the picks Montreal had, is now a New York Islander, where he's offensively gifted, but he's also defensively strong and very physical. Pickford might just be the offensive aspect of that right now. And he can, that's not to say he can't develop a more well-rounded game, but as of right now, rather one-dimensional. When you're picking, 81st, you're not really getting fully well-rounded players. I like the swing on offense here. Everyone's going to have that stay-at-home defenseman. You're going to be able to find guys like that throughout, the next couple of years. I like the swing for the guy who can shoot the puck.
Absolutely. And one thing the Canadians are also doing, as many people pointed out, is that they really like these players that will have a strong second half,
Yes, it's a great point. They love the guys who rise in their draft year, right? Like
Yeah.
Slavkovsky rose in his draft year.
Yeah.
They really do love that player who shows that when it's time to get going, they start to rise. Now, in this player's instance, that had passed him by. This was his draft plus 1 season. He was able to put it together after that, and we'll see a couple more of those throughout the rest of the draft.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Canadians really love that profile of player who is showing I'm on the rise. It would be interesting to see if they picked earlier in the draft, if a guy like a James Higgins fell into their lap,
Mhm.
before 9, I think or 7 when Boston picked.
Yes.
It would have been interesting to see what happened there.
The Canadians took up next one of 2 goalies that they took at 82. They took Arseni Radkov from the MHL also. I don't know a whole lot about this guy. I don't know if there's anything out there really that much about him.
Yeah, EP had him in the guide. He wasn't ranked. He didn't have a number next to his name, but he was in the guide. 6'3", 198, goaltender over in the MHL. He's committed to UMass in the NCAA. So hey, he's not going to have to deal with that KHL contract nonsense. His glove hand was a bit of an issue. EP noted that he was getting beat to the glove side pretty consistently. They did say that, quote, he is a wild card amongst the goalie class. So, the type of guy who can develop into an NHL asset potentially, but they really don't know at this point. The frame, the 6'3", 198, good size for a goalie. We'll have to see. Again, this is an area where you're leaning on a guy like Bobrov, who might know a little bit more of what's going on over there. This is the second Russian goalie they've taken as well. They took Volokin a few years ago, and now they take another Russian goalie here. I also just found it was interesting. We'll talk about him in a little bit. They took another goalie. They took two goalies in this draft.
Yeah.
I find it kind of reassuring that the Canadiens are just going to keep trying to grab a goalie. I think you should take one at least every draft and just hope that one of them hits, right? Like, we feel pretty confident in Fowler, feel pretty confident in Dobish for that matter, even though he's not a draft pick from this front office. But you can never be so confident that you just stop taking them. Otherwise, like, the Canadiens would stop taking defensemen at this point because they've got a billion of them. They're going to keep taking those just in case, they need somebody to hit later on.
Yes, but between the two goalies, they got a guy, which I was glad because it looked like they weren't going to get anybody from the U.S. National Development Program, which I feel like, it's been pretty strong of late. So I would have wanted a guy from there, and that would be LJ Mooney, who you told me, I didn't know this, he was Logan Cooley's cousin.
Logan Cooley's cousin. I believe Scott actually told us that. Logan Cooley's cousin. LJ stands for Little John. His father's name is John, so he is Little John, which is great. Yes, he's a forward out of the USNTDP, which I also like taking players from that program. That program is strong. Like, we can put the whole, don't love rooting for the United States in hockey thing, rooting against them always, blah, blah, blah. This program is strong, and it's good to get players from this program. EP had him ranked 73rd, so to get him at 113th, it's pretty good. 5'7", 162. That's probably the indicator of why he fell into the fourth round. The quote, the words were dynamic, fearless. He has that dog in him. He's a competitor. Skating is his top attribute. His speed is there. If he can develop sort of into a really annoying forechecker, you've got a player there. Like, I like when they take players that are projectable in that I see his speed. I see he has a motor. I see he's a competitor. I can project you, even if you're a third or fourth liner, as a guy who's just going to annoy people. And that's always going to have a home in the National Hockey League. So to get a player like that in the fourth round, you love to see it.
Especially with this Montreal Canadiens, this iteration of Montreal Canadiens. All right, up next is another goalie and a Cournoyer at that, but not related to that those Cournoyers. Alexis Cournoyer from, I believe, Cape Breton. Obviously in the queue, he's a Quebecer. He's from Trois-Rivières, but yes, Cape Breton.
Yeah, he was unranked by Elite Prospects. Interestingly enough, when he found out he was drafted, he was headed to Nashville for development camp as an invite because he is a draft +1. So he figured, I didn't get drafted. Nashville invited me to their camp. I'm going to go there. The Canadiens said, not so fast. You better book another flight to Montreal. Late riser, 6'4". So again, good size for a goalie. I think Montreal's kind of got a type there. They like to pick a bigger goalie. Good work ethic, willingness to improve. He is going to go to Cornell this year at university. So he'll play in the NCAA. I find it interesting that a lot of the players who are coming out of the Canadian Hockey League are committing to NCAA schools. It's sort of something that we talked about, and Cournoyer is one of them. Nice to see that player next to that logo again, isn't it? It's nice to see that last name, even though they're not related. It is kind of nice to see that.
Yes.
All right, next we have Carlos Handel he's a German player, but he was playing in Halifax in the queue. EP had him at 104th, so at 179th in the 6th round, pretty good stuff. A little over 6 foot, 172 right shot D. His skating is spectacular. Fluid mover, fleet of foot, strong transition game. The forecheck kind of challenged him this year, from what Elite Prospects was saying. He had a hard time dealing with plays when the forecheck was coming in behind him and he had to make a quick play. But the mobility and passing talent is there. He needs to develop D-zone plays. This seems like the right-hand version of Engstrom. To me personally, that's who I see in this mold. And, Engstrom, we're seeing that the Canadiens are able to develop him particularly well. I have high hopes, even though he's a 6th-round pick. I have high hopes for Handel developing into some kind of professional player in North America.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, 2 more guys here. EP didn't have much on these guys. In fact, I don't think they were ranked in there. They weren't shown in their guide at all. Andrew McNeil, a defenseman out of Kitchener of the OHL. 6'2", was not in the guide. That was in the 6th round at 89th overall. And then in the 7th, they took Max Vig, my favorite name that they drafted this year. Very cool name. Defenseman out of Cedar Rapids of the USHL rather. Again, not ranked, but they take 2 shots on defensemen late in the draft. It's not a bad place to go to, especially taking, looking at the USHL as a place to find those late round gems. I kind of like that. We'll see what they do. Obviously, with development camp coming up, we're going to get to look at a couple of these guys, in that rookie camp. So stay tuned. We'll have some more thoughts on them as we see them sort of take the ice in those practice jerseys.
Awesome. All right. So, because it's the off season and because, they get so busy leading up until the draft, we're going to give our lovely draft experts a week or so to kind of, recover and have a vacation. And then we'll have them on, as we usually do over the course of the summer, we'll have them on to recap all the things the Montreal Canadiens did, and talk about, how did it go? Like what, how do we feel? Do we feel that this is a good draft? Like generally what's out there, we feel like the Canadiens did good. All right. Up next, we have some supplemental Noah Dobson thoughts. It was the most exciting thing to happen in the draft for the Montreal Canadiens, hands down. We're going to talk about that very quickly in just a moment. Noah Dobson is a Montreal Canadien. You will have caught our episode first previewing that with the giant hat, and then the bonus episode after which it happened. And now we have a bit of we've had some time for the trade to become official. First of all, which was crazy how long it took. I know why. But also we've heard from the player. We've heard even Carey Price weighed in. We've heard from Martin St. Louis. So what do we think, Ian? Some additional thoughts on Noah Dobson now that the dust is settled?
Yeah, I have 2 main thoughts here. The first being, especially, we didn't have the benefit of knowing this when we made the bonus episode as the trade was unfolding on Friday night. But we do now know that of all of the teams who desperately wanted to move their first round picks to get help now, right? We knew that was a crowded market the Canadiens were playing in. Only one team did it, and it was the Montreal Canadiens. Only one team managed to move those picks or a pick of the first round and get immediate help, and that was Montreal. I think it's twofold. It means Noah Dobson really wants to be in Montreal because apparently Columbus made a better offer, both in trade to the Islanders and in money in term to the player. Dobson's agent said he took less to play in Montreal, which cool. Love to see that. Always love to see that. I don't know how much less he could have taken. He's making $9.5 million, but to each their own. But I think it shows that the Canadiens understand when they need to go after something. It couldn't have been easy to move those 2 first round picks, and it couldn't have been easy to move both of those and Emil Heineman, a guy that they love. I want to go into the Heineman aspect of this second, but what do you make of that the Canadiens were part of that shallow pool of teams trying to improve now and came out as really the only team to do that with those first round picks?
I think it says a lot about, first of all, teams wanting to deal with Montreal, right? It feels like with the Patrick Laine trade and with this Islanders trade, the other team made it easy for Montreal, right? You're not seeing any petty animosity like you're seeing with Toronto and Vegas, which if we have time, we'll get into in a second. But so that's one of the things. The other thing that I think is that Montreal knows that this is probably going to be the best situation, right? When free agency opens, we don't know if Aaron Ekblad's going to be on the market, but we know there's going to be teams that are going to be willing to send a Connor McDavid amount of money at him, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if Montreal wanted to do that, right? They also knew that if they were to find this kind of defenseman in the draft, it was going to take at least 3 years for them to develop, right? So we want the players hitting the stride at the same time, right? You want your Slavkovsky, your Lane Hudson, your Noah Dobson, your Cole Caulfield, your Ivan Demidov. You want all of those guys hitting their stride at around the same time so that prime kind of overlaps for all of them, right? I think that's really key. So I think the Montreal Canadiens realized that this was probably the best situation they're going to get. Nobody's going to hand them anything. And to get a player that wanted to be here and to start a positive business relationship with the New York Islanders' new GM, somebody who's a forward-thinking, new mindset type of guy, I think is fantastic. And honestly, I have to say, it's not just because we got Noah Dobson. I think the Islanders did really well in that first round.
Yeah, they did some great work with those 2 picks. Like, I think, we're kind of going to be sweating to hope that, even if those 2 guys, Eklund and Aitchison show up and become star NHLers, you just have to hope that Dobson also becomes that and we're cool.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Montreal was taking Eklund. That seems so antithetical to what they were trying to do, which was get bigger, especially up front. He's a smaller player, so that wouldn't have happened. Aitchison would have been a guy I would have expected Montreal to be in on if he was available.
100%.
Big, violent defenseman. Like, that seems very much along the lines of what they would have wanted to do. But yeah, the Islanders did really well with those 2 picks. So love to see that there. Heineman is the other aspect of this I want to talk about. He was part of that identity line, that 4th line of Yoel Armia, himself, and Jake Evans. Now it looks like the only one who's going to be left is Jake Evans. Yeah. And to me, and we'll have to see what happens on July 1st and, into the coming weeks of the summer to see how the Canadiens want to address those 2 absences on their 4th line. But I'm wondering how Florian Xhekaj and Owen Beck feel right now.
Probably feeling positive.
Knowing that there's at least 1, maybe 2 spots open there for them, I think they have to be pretty fired up that there's a chance they can come into camp and win a spot now.
Yeah.
At least one of them, maybe both of them, but I think they're going to have a lot of competition with one another to try to steal a roster spot to start the season.
Absolutely. I think what plays to Owen Beck's advantage is the fact that he can also play center and that he's really good at faceoffs. And what plays to Florian Xhekaj's advantage is that he will not be pushed around. In fact, he will be the one doing the pushing around. So anyways, I think it's I'm not too worried about that 4th line. I just think it's just going to take some time for them to gel. So it's not going to be as good as the identity line as quickly as the identity line was, but you still have your Jake Evans, and the Canadiens must be feeling good about those 2 guys to let both Armia and Emil Heineman go. I am sorry to see Emil Heineman go. I was a big fan. And after questioning the trade for him for so long, after seeing him in action in the NHL, I was super happy with it, obviously. But at the end of the day, I think the Montreal Canadiens feel pretty comfortable letting Emil Heineman go, and the Islanders are going to love it.
Yeah, I saw Arpon Basu post that the Islanders just got themselves one of the strongest trade chips in the NHL in Emil Heineman because he only gets traded in like blockbuster deals. Yeah. It's the only thing he's part of. So I think that's very funny. I hope he doesn't take all that too personally. Like, he's a very, very good hockey player who knows exactly what he is. Yeah, that's a guy who his time in Montreal was so short. I will be rooting for him no matter where he goes. Mm-hmm. Like, that's super exciting to see. That he's going to get an opportunity in New York to play a pretty significant role on a team that loves their 4th line, right? Just as a fan base, they love those kinds of guys. They fell in love with Casey Cizikas and Matt Martin. I think they'll have a very easy time falling in love with that player.
Yes, very much so. And we wish him all the best. We want him to succeed. All right, real quick, let's get into that Toronto Vegas thing because we do have to. Yeah. We can't not talk about it.
Yeah, so essentially what's happening is the Toronto Maple Leafs are kind of accusing the Vegas Golden Knights of tampering with Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner's still under contract technically with the Toronto Maple Leafs, which means no one else is allowed to talk to him. And yet the Vegas Golden Knights have been linked to him since the season ended, which means they've probably been talking to him this whole time. What's essentially happening now, from what I understand, is the Maple Leafs are extorting the Vegas Golden Knights in saying, look, you guys could just sign him on July 1st, and then we'll go to the league and complain and say that you tampered. And or you could just, we could trade him to you. You can get him. We can do a sign and trade. You can get that 8th year, and we want Nick Hague and Nick Waugh. And it's sort of like, it's your move. You guys get to choose. Do you want to give us this stuff, or do you want to roll the dice and see what the NHL does to you once they're done with you? I think that this is Bush League stuff. Not by either one of these teams, but the fact that the league kind of has fostered this environment for this to happen is entirely unprofessional. And just like, we shouldn't be able to just blackmail teams. It is incredibly funny, and I love to see it happen, especially to a team like Vegas.
Right.
But
Vegas is getting Vegas,
Yeah, I kind of, I hate to hand it to the Maple Leafs, but they are kind of doing well here. I really appreciate this aspect for them.
Especially with like getting John Tavares for so cheap, right?
I don't have
like,
other things they should be worrying about. And they're like, no, we're going to stick it to these Golden Knights.
Which I think is really funny, but like the league is 100% at fault here because we know tampering happens. Like how is every player signing at like 12:05 or 12:03 with a team? It's happening, right? And the other thing too is that a lot of times like the teams will know and they'll just let it happen, right? Like they might not officially give permission, but like, the Toronto Maple Leafs were always going to part with Mitch Marner at the end of this contract, right? So if I were Toronto, I wouldn't care, but I just think it's so funny. Like, do you think if it was a team like that's not Vegas or Tampa that gets away with exploiting all these loopholes, do you think the Toronto Maple Leafs would have done the same thing?
Well, I'm thinking back to a few years ago when Dubas was still in charge and everyone knew that Zach Hyman was going to the Oilers. Everybody knew it. The Oilers were trying to make a trade. They were trying to do the noble thing and say, hey, we'd like to get him under contract as soon as possible. Can we throw a draft pick at you? And Kyle Dubas dug his heels in the ground and said, no, I'm not doing that. And like, it was just kind of like, Kyle, you're getting nothing for this player.
You could get something.
You could get a 5th or a 6th round draft pick, sure, but the alternative was nothing. Like he stood on principle for nothing. I find that the alternative of that with the same franchise is just like it just happened. It's very funny that it's happening again. And maybe that's an internal thing. Like just within the organization, they didn't like how that felt the first time. They're like, no, we're not doing this again. You're going to trade him. We're going to trade him to you and you're going to give us something or we're going to go tell dad. And that's kind of what they're threatening to do.
I just think it's really funny.
It's great theater. I love it.
Absolutely the exact opposite of how the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Islanders conducted their business, right?
Yeah.
And
again, there were grown-ups in the room.
Before, and like one thing I do want to say too is that before the picks were made, it felt like, the Islanders got fleeced. Now that they've made the picks, it feels much better. They did really good. Like the Islanders did great.
Yeah. No, always rooting for Heino. That's going to be, I'm excited to see him, hopefully get a bit of a more extended role in New York, but even if he's the same 4th line guy, the Islanders are getting a gem there. And just a really cool guy.
You should get a shirt that says always rooting for Heino. So when
always
you go
see
them in Long Island, when you go see
that. Yeah, I'll probably be at that game because I think it'll be fun to watch their reaction to Noah Dobson showing up for the first time. If the Tavares return is anything to be, sort of the amuse-bouche for this, it could be rather funny. So I might have to be there for that.
Awesome. All right, it's time for trivia so we can get out of here and give you guys back your day. Oh, tomorrow we will be doing a preview of our a free agency day, what the Canadiens need, what they can fill from within, what they might be looking for, and that's all tomorrow. But first, trivia.
So be sure to listen to that episode before noon. So that you will feel informed beforehand instead of afterwards.
Yes, before 12:03 when all the guys sign.
And there's nobody left on the market. All right, we have 2 draft questions. This is the previous one that came from our buddy Scott. Which 2 former Habs draft picks share a birthday and a draft position? So same number of pick and same birthday. Do you remember the answer to this one, Laura?
I remember Brendan Gallagher was one of them, and I forgot the other one a second time.
And the other one was Daniel Audette. They were both born on May 6th, pick 147. Jeff Harpel had the answer correct on that one. All right, today's question, also draft related. Alexander Zharkovsky, Montreal's first pick in the 2025 NHL draft, was taken with the 34th overall pick. Who was the last player Montreal took 34th overall? When did it happen? Who was it? If you have the answer to both those questions, put them down in the comments below this video, email them to us, send it to us any way you know how. We'll shout you out on the next episode of the show.
All right, you heard the man. That's how you can answer the trivia questions. In the meantime, we're still going. For those of you just joining us, we will still be going throughout the off season. We do go down to 3 episodes a week, second week of July or third week of July. But we'll be around, so make sure you're subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You can find us all over social media. We're on TikTok, Blue Sky, and Instagram at Locked On Canadiens. Our Gmail address is lockedoncanadiens@gmail, and you can send us mailbag questions, episode ideas, things like that. Please do get in touch with us. Also, you'll find my co-host all over social media at Maybe It's Ian. You'll find me at The Active Pick. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with our free agency preview.